Hi, everyone. My name is Siamak Paulson, and this is my podcast. Talking with Hernan Cifuentes today. Very happy to have you, Hernan, in this podcast today. Good morning.
Good morning, Siamak. Thank you so much for the invitation. Happy to be in your podcast too.
Perfect. Very good. Hernan, I think you might have watched some of my previous podcasts. My first question from the people I talk to is always about their career. So a little bit about your background, about your career. Where did you start, and how did you end up in geotechnical engineering, more into the tailings engineering?
For sure. I start. So I think it's a long story so far. But yeah, my journey started obviously in Chile. I'm originally from Chile. I grew up in Concepción, which is the second largest city in Chile. It's in the central south part of Chile, 500 kilometers from Santiago, which is the capital. So it's a city which is recognized by the good universities, good quality of professional as well. So I think, and I grew up there. I went to high school there. I went to the university. At that time, obviously, when I was younger, as typical many people, I got confused about my interests. I always knew I was become an engineer, but in the last part of the high school, I started with some doubt about it. And then obviously my first year in university was studying chemistry, which was a good experience. But after 1 year there, I reinforced my interest to engineering. So I restarted and then I moved to civil engineering. So
Perfect.
and I did the civil engineering there, which I have to say, so in Chile is not as here. So civil engineering is 6 years. So I think to be a civil engineer in Chile, you have to be a master equivalent
Okay.
professional. So I think a 6 year, which in average is take people 8 years because it's a quite complex program. Which is the difference because we have two type of engineering. So they have the execution engineering, which is like a 4 year bachelor, like a similar to many Anglo-Saxon countries, and the 6 year engineering, which is the civil. Okay, so I think I went to civil engineering, of course. So I think I took all the program, and then obviously at that time I wasn't sure about what of the areas I will be doing my career at the end, but I start obviously considering hydraulic and geotech because obviously what the sort of field which I think was the more exposed to the field visit, to the nature, to the imagination of the engineering, because we used to have a lot of data to make assumptions, which is different in the structure, which is a more, as the word says, structural work, and maybe it's more repetitive task. So, and then obviously my thesis at the time was like a soil dynamics topic with a little bit of hydrogeological focus on closed basin in the north of Chile, which was quite interesting job. And then obviously in parallel to my studies, to my two final year in the university, I started working in a consultancy company, which was owned by a professor in the university, which at the end used to be one of my best mentor at that time in my career. He offered me that role, and I started working with him like 2-3 years, and then moved to Santiago because at that time, obviously, Conception, which maybe is a place where a lot of good professionals came up, but not necessarily the best job are in there. So I think Chile is a quite centralized country. So I think most of
Yeah.
the better job for engineer has to be in the capital. So I think I moved to an offer position in Santiago. I started
Do you
working
want
a
to
consultant.
do
Sorry?
you want to do you want to name the professor that you had or offered you the doctoral and?
Yeah, so at that time was Jorge Raneda. He used to run a small consultant company, maybe 30 people at that time. Which obviously was small to the level of consultant I were in the future, but at that time, obviously in my city, used to be a medium-sized consultancy. So and then I moved to Santiago, and I was quite lucky to work in a quite interesting project at the time. A bicentennial project in Chile was obviously in order to capture most of the wastewater from the capital city, which at that time some of them discharged directly into the river, and obviously the idea was a quite immense job because obviously of the urbanization and everything. We have to intervene and do like a subway, but of the pipelines, big pipelines, 20 meters underground, and then obviously do all of the connection and go to the final treatment plant. So I think it was a quite interesting project in that consultancy. And I was obviously at that time a junior engineer, part of the team. And that office as well, I used to work for some mining companies because obviously the consultancy roles. And then in some of this job, I was obviously offered a position to move to my first experience in mining, which was Collahuasi. Collahuasi is the second largest copper company in the world, a huge production. And then I was offered obviously to try to improve the process, obviously the slurry and the water recovery, which was one of the main driver of the company at that time. Obviously, that included tailings, but from the transport of the slurry perspective and how we can really recover or maximize the water recovery. It was not quite obviously in the design of the tailings at the time, but it was a pretty good experience because I was exposed to some pilot tests at that time. I'm talking about 2005, 2006. I was exposed to very huge pilot tests for thickening and a lot of technology because obviously the main driver is water recovery. Was working there 5 years approximately. And then I moved to Escondida, BHP, for another role. Obviously, just more focused and responsible the tailings facilities and the water for the mine, which a huge area. We have like 200 people. I was in charge of that, and we have to be responsible of the tailings facility. We have to the water the mine, the water obviously management for the plant, and ensure obviously the supply of water. Was a quite interesting job and pretty good experience. And obviously, as soon as I get that job, obviously some issues happen in the company, and obviously some typical audits in these big corporations. And in one of the audits, they say, okay, so you are doing very well in terms of the management of these facilities, but we don't have any sort of a unique responsible to be obviously the leader of that. So I think who will be the orchestral director of this tailings facility, which is the second largest in the world. We are talking about 60 square kilometers. So I think it's the second largest because in Chile there is one, which is the Talabre, which is the largest, and this is the second. But for production, is by far the largest. And obviously that was after maybe 6 months of my arrival to Escondida, and then the president of the company directly say, Hernan, I want you to be the principal for this facility and the responsible for everything. That include obviously the operation, the construction, design, environmental aspect, legal aspect. So it was a quite huge challenge, and obviously no extent of difficulties at the beginning because we have to create that role. And obviously in a matrix organization that represent a lot of challenge as well, because not necessarily those other teams, depending of other vice presidency, not necessarily respond to you. So we have to align everything, and at the end was quite good. We couldn't obviously improve the condition of the system. The shareholders at that time were quite happy with the work, and obviously that means a lot of activities as well, because obviously at that time Escondida was producing like 240,000 tons per day, and they were planning the expansion to 400,000 tons per day, which is actually the current operation, the current production they have, which is, there is no mine in the world which is in the order of the 240, the second one, so which is used to be Escondida. So I think they're by far the largest production in the world. And we have to start planning that, obviously, in the same facility, how we can really make this happen. And we create a committee and start, obviously, doing the evaluation. I was quite fortunate because I have to travel a lot in terms of looking for technologies, looking how we can really, we can do the management of those big production, what sort of technology we can implement. And obviously, we finally found out at that time, for that level of production, obviously, there were no more solution than keep the conventional. And we have to obviously optimize that conventional solution. But obviously that start digging something in my brain about the possibility to expand, obviously, the pursuit for new sort of solution, which will be out of the conventional. What will be? There is no technologies, and obviously from the physical perspective, as engineer, we are quite used to do the approach. And okay, what else we can do? And then I started obviously looking for new solution, and then found some guys doing some sort of a biotechnology, and I found was quite interesting. And obviously I give them a contract, but I realized obviously because their background was not engineering, they didn't have any sort of a mining background, was quite difficult to me explain obviously the scale of the condition for a mine. So they obviously they used to work very well at the bench scale, but thinking how we can really move a solution from there to the scale of the mining, and particularly this mine, obviously was quite difficult because they were more scientists rather than engineers. But the experience was good. And obviously I realized, okay, this is the area I want to explore in the future. And I was obviously working a lot on that, a lot of traveling around because obviously BHP shareholders, Rio Tinto, BHP in Australia, a lot of trips around. And then I realized at a certain point of my career, I want to make a change. And by 2015, after maybe 5 years working there, so I decided to quit and then move to Australia to pursue a PhD in this topic, which was quite interesting to me, looking for more sustainable tailing solution. And obviously, in that exploration, looking for different alternatives, I realized, obviously, as engineers, we are quite comfortable in the physical approach with a little bit chemical, but never extending to the biological. And obviously, considering obviously my experience and exposed to the field and all of these solutions, I say, why we are always fighting against nature? And then I realized instead of fighting against nature, we have to try to be on nature and try to align to that. And why not try to replicate certain natural conditions? So nature have the ability to heal by itself. So, and I tried to put my approach on that way. And I found obviously a lot of potential biological approaches to do that. And then I found one in which I can recreate certain geological conditions which occur naturally, but take 1,000 of years, obviously geological period.
Can you give us like an example of like when you talk about the biological solutions, like just a very simple for our audience to know what we're talking about?
Yeah, so use bacteria.
Oh, yeah.
Use bacteria to enhance something. Okay, so at that time
that's to kind of enhance the dewatering and like the strength and the consolidation of the tailings.
Yes, different properties. So obviously there is bacteria for everything, and we don't know. At that point, when I start doing more research on the topics, I realized. So I think we don't know much about bacteria. Okay, as a human. So I think the knowledge we have of them is quite small. So I think obviously I'm not a microbiologist, I'm not an expert in bacteria particularly, but in all of this information, when I start doing some literature review, I realize we don't know much more than 5 or 10% of the bacteria in the world. And so there is a lot of opportunities to really start exploring more how we can use those bacteria for our advantage. Okay. And as you say, obviously, how we can really try to replicate those geological conditions by enhancing, obviously, those bacteria and try to, obviously, align to the properties we want to really improve. So as permeability, obviously, the strength of the tailings, how we can really ensure, obviously, alter some chemical condition in order to reduce acid formation. And then, obviously, we cannot cover everything, but at least was the approach. And then
Sure.
obviously I started doing that PhD in Australia. I joined to the team at UQ under the supervision of Professor David Williams. Obviously, it was at that time was a little bit different because I was not the typical PhD student, dedicated full time, which obviously no much experience in the field. So at that time, I used to have like a 12 year of experience working on largest corporation with a lot of people under my charge, and then I have to switch everything on that and dedicate to my PhD, which obviously I didn't have anyone under me. I have to do all of the job,
Yes.
all of the work to make it happen, and it was quite good. Um, and because at that time I was quite fortunate as well because BHP believe in this topic and they support my adventure as well on the PhD. They never were quite happy when I quit, and then obviously when I talked to them about my interest of the PhD, they fully support on the adventure and they helped me with the PhD, which obviously
Sure.
made this decision easier because obviously as at that time obviously I have my family and my kids and obviously changed my life to be a student again in the typical PhD scholarship was not obviously quite attractive, but they fully support my decision and obviously I was a quite a interesting and nice period.
That's right. That's right. I think it was around 2018 or around that there. I think I met you in a conference presenting, and you mentioned something about this, and I was just thinking, it's hard. Like, if you had like all of that experience back in Chile and like, moved your family, basically stop your full-time engineering work and then becoming a student at that stage. But yeah, it's good to see and hear that you've done it and you're quite successful in that, Hernan. I also want us to quickly turn to and switch to your recent roles, also most focused on consulting and as an independent consultant, because I think you're not necessarily working for a big company anymore. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's it's a pretty good point because obviously as soon as while I was doing the PhD, I closed my I make a decision, and then I was not keen to take a role because I really want to dedicate full time to the PhD. Obviously, because I was an industry person, I keep doing special consultancies, some advisory for the typical big companies in Australia, in Chile, in Peru, and I was involved in a lot of review at the time, but not necessarily using my full time because my full time was for the PhD. As soon as I finished the PhD, was in 2020, I opened to the market. Obviously, I received a call from the industry, which obviously I used to have experience, and then and they called me obviously if I want to go back to the industry, and at that time I say no, and no because I didn't want to be in the industry again. Is because at that part of my career I realized I have a little experience on consulting. My few years on consulting was maybe the 3-4 years of my when I was a junior engineer in my career, and then I moved to the industry, to the mining industry, and obviously I didn't have much experience on that. So I think at that part of my career, I think I have to really make a more robust part in my experience the consultancy, and I joined to ITC Williams. I was quite fortunate because I received a call from different consultant offices, and then I decided for them just because obviously they are quite good company recognized in Australia. A lot of people with a quite interesting technical background. They have a laboratory, which obviously was quite happy to help on that, and obviously they were quite interested to follow and expand to South America. So obviously, and that obviously drew my attention because obviously being consultant in Australia, I really didn't want to lose my connection to South America because obviously I have a lot of I can value to that. And then obviously I worked for a few years till last year, 2024. Obviously I decided to make the change, and I quit to my principal position at ATC, and I decided to go on my own. And that was particularly because obviously I really want to restart exploring this sort of sustainable tailings approach, which how can I really put more energy in the biological solutions, which I think to me is something which is still spending. We are not doing much effort on that. We are still relying on physical solution, filtering, mostly thickening, which obviously has been a lot of improvement in the last few years, but not necessarily to cope in a short term the big production you are having in South America, for example. So in South America, most of the mining companies produce more than 100,000 tons per day. And as you can see, for example, the largest filtration plant we have in the world is what we have in Australia is Carrara with no more than 35,000. If we go for the thickening solution, the largest production is 90,000, which is done in Chile by Centinela, and not exempt of a lot of years to really try to improve their operation and try to have a sort of a normal result. So, and obviously a lot of mining companies are moving to 200,000 tons per day and no solution. So that the reason is obviously working for a consultant full time. Again, obviously, I think obviously not necessarily I have to be on the projects I want, because obviously you have to, as the consultant say, you have to feed the pigeon. You have to have a team under you, and you have to be obviously the role of the controller, reviewer, leading the project, but not necessarily choosing the project you want to be in. So, but if you work as independent, you can choose where you want to be, and obviously what project you can be in. And then I decided to move on, obviously, and try to do my startup soon. I have some partners to do there, but in the role of independent is as well how with my expertise I can help companies in terms of a more biased approach, because I realize as well. So one of the most challenge in the industry at the moment is most of the work is done by the big consulting firms, but when you review, which I do a lot, the product of that, the quality, not necessarily is what we expect. And because obviously there is a lot of job, a lot of work to do, and not necessarily the senior people is getting involved in all of this work. And you see most of this is young people doing the work, not necessarily a critical thinking in the way they are doing, a lot of assumptions not necessarily done in the proper manner. So being an independent is quite easy to work and dedicate my time to really try to address those points and obviously help to really build those products in a better way. So so I think and it's quite easy as well to me move as myself as independent rather than to move for a company, because sometimes they just want you, not necessarily the company. But
very similar.
It's part of the business.
Very similar to what I did back in 2020. I left Golder and kind of started my own journey. And a lot of people think, when you go on your own, you'll be less busy. Is that correct, Hernan?
No, I'm fully busy. I'm much more busy than before, which is quite good. So I'm quite happy, because also I'm working the projects I want to work. I'm quite, I come back to be in these large projects. So I'm assisting some of the largest production in the world. I'm working a project with 400,000 tons per day. Another project, which is an expansion to 430,000 tons per day, which will be the largest in the world if that happens. So doing all of those review, I'm doing sort of work in Australia as well. So I think overall, I'm quite busy, but it's not how busy you are, is how happy you are doing those projects.
Absolutely.
So to me, that is the question. So I'm quite happy. I don't have any problem to wake up every day at 5 a.m. to have meetings, because obviously of the time difference with South America. But because I found that motivation. But as well,
Yeah.
I can liberate easily the time to dedicate to my really interest, which is how can I restart doing sort of a startup in order to try to address this biological solution, which is obviously my motivation as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And I want to ask you about your opinion, Hernan, about the future of tailings as well. So where do you think the future of tailings management, where do we go from here? Or like, we know that the pressure on mining companies are increasing in terms of adopting sustainable solutions. What's your opinion, the role of biotechnology, AI, and all of those?
Yeah, so I think we agree on the increasing pressure on the mining companies, and from different parts. Obviously, how the society in general obviously respond to the mining industry. Everyone knows we need to obviously to decarbonize the world. We need those critical minerals, but no one want the critical minerals explode near to their backyard. So how we can really deal with that? And obviously, unfortunately, the mining has the bad reputation of not necessarily a good commitment with the society or the surrounding communities. But obviously, we have to consider this been changing in the last few years, and particularly in the tailing space, obviously with the adoption and implementation of these new standards, which obviously force these companies to do better. But the thing to me is, everyone agree on that. My feeling and my opinion, a lot of the effort at the moment is not necessarily in the focus of the engineering. The improvement in the last few years is a lot in the governance, which of course will be considered as the first step. But after that happened, and most of the big mining companies improve a lot the governance structure and create this sort of a different level of assurance, still, I don't see in detail how they really approach to improve the engineering, how they really focus on do better solutions, because everyone now is relying on the filtration. And obviously, everyone talk about the filtration, and I totally agree. Obviously, is the best available technology we have, but doesn't solve the issue when you move to over 100,000 tons per day. Because obviously, I have some discussion, and I'm going to start promoting as well. So I think a new project which is about the massive dry stacking, because we can solve the issue of the filtration because the technology is improving very fast, but not necessarily we are at the same pace with how we can really manage the material produced for those filters, and we dispose in a safety manner. So I think if you filter 100,000 tons per day, okay, maybe you can find those filters because filters now can produce 8,000 tons per day at a good pace. So I think is how much you are keen to pay, you can have that. But not necessarily you will have, obviously, the technology to manage those sort of material in order to stack in a proper way, which is the same issue we have as well when we scale up condition for the co-disposal. So I think, to me, we have to start doing much more work on that and put effort on that sort of a question. And now, as per your question, the role of biotechnology or artificial intelligence and modelings, I'm quite keen on that. So I think biotechnology is something, as engineers, we have to start exploring more. There is a lot of solutions. We are not talking about that will solve everything, but I'm pretty sure if we are quite open to that solution, we can start obviously adopting much more in the future. There is other field which obviously in which the biotechnology play an important role, but still in the tailing space is still pending. So I think we have to really put more effort on that. Regarding to the artificial intelligence, I have to say, so I'm quite skeptical because obviously there is a lot of obviously a lot of progress on that. But my feeling when I do review and I work with particularly with young people is they rely too much on that, not necessarily questioning. And to me, that is something which I have to be concerned because I'm from the old school where you have to use the books, when you have to have a strong theory in order to make your assumption and make your decision. Not necessarily people is having that. People is the same with the modeling. So a lot of people using the model, but not necessarily questioning what is behind the scenes of those models, if they understand the black box of how those models work. And sometimes you see a lot of beautiful presentations, but when you start asking the critical question on that, they don't know how does it work. They don't know what is that. And to me, that is something which you have to be really aware, because there is a lot of obviously energy put on that, but not necessarily people is questioning that. And particularly that is from young people, because I remember working in my previous consultancy, and one of the young engineer, which we used to try to put them when they just join to the company. Okay, you have to learn all of this model in order to be obviously proficient and try to help with the work. And they make a comment and say, obviously, these models looks like a video games. Yeah. And because the graphics and what they can do, and obviously that could be a quite good interpretation, but obviously to me, the positive way is they can adopt that easily in terms of, because it's quite friendly for them. But the point of concern is I have to be careful, because not necessarily they understood what they are doing in there. They are just trying to recreate something, but not necessarily obviously questioning that. And to me, that is an important point, because if you see most of the failures sometimes is because we really we didn't put focus in the critical elements, and we oversee some important factors that could trigger a failure. And and that is the value as well as an independent consultant, because obviously we don't have bias with companies, we don't have big contracts, but as well we can add that sort of experience, try to addressing or identifying those critical points.
Absolutely. No, I really enjoyed talking to you, Hernan. Very interesting topics we covered. I hope we had more time to continue this discussion, but this is what we have time for today. So I say goodbye to you, but I'm pretty sure we speak more about these topics when the time comes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Siamak.
Very good. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
See
Bye.
ya. Bye.